Oakland police is addressing this past weekend's rise in violent crime. Let's listen in.
At this time last year, we had 13 homicides. That's an increase of 215%. That is completely unacceptable, and it's tragic for a community to have to deal with this level of trauma and pain. My heart goes out to all of the families that have lost loved ones as a result of this violence in the city of Oakland. On Saturday alone, we lost 3 people to gun violence. Since March 11th, we've lost 13 people to homicide. This is unacceptable. President Biden called it an epidemic, one in which this city needs to respond to. So far, there's been 159 shootings, compared to 79 at this same time last year. It's a 101% increase in shootings. Our carjackings have risen to an unprecedented level. We have 149 carjackings compared to 57 this same time last year. It's a 161% increase. Our robberies are currently at 340 for the year compared to 226 at this same time last year. That's a 50% increase. At the end of the year, this department was impacted by a loss of millions of dollars to our budget as a result of budget cuts. Those millions of dollars were resources. They were officers. There were officers in our ceasefire team. There were officers in our crime reduction teams. There were officers in our community resource officer teams. There were traffic officers. We lost all of these resources, and we see the tremendous impact that that loss is having on our community. Today, our council members will be taking votes for CARE Act funds, hopefully reallocating resources to the department. This is a tall task in the city of Oakland to address this violence, but you can't do it without resources. This city has to value the lives of our community members. We need resources. We need the community's help to be able to address violence. Police can't do it alone. But we do need resources to address not only the shootings and the violence, but also the sideshow activity that's impacting communities across our city. Tragically, we had a mother that went into labor while caught in the middle of a sideshow. She was unable to get out of the sideshow, and we had to go in and send units to rescue her. These sideshows have become violent. They've become places where people who are armed with firearms consistently fire guns in our community. And no community in Oakland has not been impacted by sideshow activity. I hope today the City Council decides to allocate the funds needed to reallocate resources to the police department so again we can begin to address violent crime, address sideshow, and be able to make Oakland a safe city. With that, I'll take questions. Yes, sir.
What would you say to folks, residents who have questions about
it's gonna be like a cross-talk type thing.
Shifting of resources during weekend shifts, the extent to which tactically officers may need to pull back and pull away from the situation or reassess progress of sideshow participants as they move throughout streets and highways.
Yeah, there's only a limited number of resources without the access to overtime funds. So when you're attempting to address sideshow, you need to have a sideshow detail that's deployed specifically to address sideshow. When you have 3 homicides in a 24-hour period, that is taxing on your police officers. It forces us to use those resources that should be dedicated to reducing violent crime and trying to apprehend the people responsible for these shootings to addressing sideshow. But there's still not enough resources to do both. And so that's the challenge. Without these resources, we have to make a choice between do we address violent crime or do we address sideshow, both of which are violent. We shouldn't have to do that. We should be given the resources that we need to be able to address both. And that's what I'm asking for.
You mentioned the sideshows moving around
Well, what we've seen is robberies have impacted all of our communities across the city. Every district in our city has seen an increase in robberies. All of our vulnerable communities have been targeted. So we've seen increases in our Asian community, we've seen increases in our African American community, and we've seen increases in our Latino community. And so we've seen these crimes happening throughout the city. When you have a 50% increase, that isn't just affecting one community. That is a citywide problem, and that's what we're trying to address.
Chief, Christina Rendon here on the phone with KTVU. Not sure if you can hear me. If you can, my question is about the budget. At the end of 2020, how much was cut from the budget, and how much are you hoping that the City Council may allocate from the CARES Fund?
So at the end of December into January, we cut an additional $15 million. We had already previously cut over $10 million in June of 2020. So total, the department is getting close to $30 million that we have had reallocated from the department. And so I'm hoping to get back as much of that as we can. I don't know what the council's decision would be, but I think we all could recognize the impact of not having these resources and the impact that it's having on our community. I hope that people understand that this is trauma that is affecting our communities, our young people across the board. And we all collectively have to come together and say this is unacceptable. It's unacceptable for this level of violence and there not be a response from the city of reallocating resources to address violent crime. We all are accountable. I am for sure accountable as the chief of police, but I need the resources to be able to go out and address these crimes, and currently we don't have them.
And as a follow-up question, I just want to be clear that what you're saying is because of the 3 homicides on Saturday, an enforcement detail for the sideshow was not deployed to the 51st and Telegraph sideshow. Is that correct?
Because we got all of our overtime cut, we don't have a dedicated sideshow detail. We don't have funding for it. We had units out there to address violent crime, but when the sideshow happened, these officers have to make a decision. What do we want to address? Do we want to abandon our efforts on violent crime to address sideshow, but we don't have the resources to be able to do both, and that's the challenge for us. We need the funding to be able to deploy a sideshow detail on a weekly basis so that we can reduce sideshow and move it out of our city, but we also need support of resources to address violence reduction overall.
Okay, and so that means
Okay, we're going to go to the next question. Go ahead, sir.
No, there has not been a determination at this point, but we look at all of these crimes to determine if hate was a motivation, and if it was, we'll work with the DA's office to make sure that we charge that case in that way.
George?
Last summer, the department made a point of seeking to balance free speech and protest against budgetary needs and crime response needs. Does the department have any statements, given the events in Minnesota, trial and the recent situation in Brooklyn Center?
No, I think my heart goes out to the family. My heart goes out to the community. That when you see tragedies like this, you obviously feel for all involved, particularly the families of the deceased. I don't know all the specifics of the case, so I won't be able to comment on that. But you feel bad. You don't want to see incidents like this continue to happen across our country. We are preparing for the Derek Chauvin trial, for the outcome of that, and we'll be prepared. We hope that community, there is no community unrest, and that we can peacefully assemble, and there isn't any issues for the department to have to address in terms of crowd control. Okay. All right, and just in closing, for me, as somebody that's from Oakland, as somebody that understands what it's like to experience trauma and the impact that trauma can have on your family, these things don't leave. That when you lose someone to homicide or to death, that these are things that stick with you for the rest of your life. They become a part of the hurt and pain that you carry with you. This city has to understand 41 homicides, that is 41 families. 41 families that are impacted by this violence, 41 families that are hurting. I hear the pain, I understand, I'm trying to do my best to address this by reallocating our resources to focus on violence. But today is important. Resources are needed within the Oakland Police Department. We should be able to respond to these crimes, and I hope today decisions are made that will help give us resources to be able to quickly address those things. So I thank you for being here, and we'll see what happens.
You're watching Chron On. We'll have more news after the break.